Welcome to Skill-Based Art, a learning resource for art students and artist teachers. My name's Ben Winspear. I'm a professional artist here in Melbourne, Victoria, and today I'll be doing an oil painting from a plein air study I did recently in King Valley, Victoria. The materials I'll be using: brushes. I'll be using a combination of synthetics, hog's hair and a badger hair softening brush, a combination of rounds, flats and a couple of riggers. This rigger here, which is the Neef 95, their synthetic range, was developed by myself in conjunction with Bob Senior, because there was a real gap in the market for a nice semi-soft rigger for doing all these marks at the end of a painting. It's available from any senior art supplies or any art supplies that sells Neef products, and it's really become one of my go-to brushes for all my paintings. The colours I'll be using: blues, King's blue, Prussian blue, cobalt blue, ultramarine blue. I'm using burnt umber, some yellows, yellow ochre, cadmium yellow deep, cadmium yellow light, the reds, burnt sienna, cadmium red, alizarin crimson. I also have some black here and a violet, and of course white. The medium I'll be using today is just a 50-50 mix of gum turpentine and linseed oil. I have a couple of other tools here which I'll show you, which I may or may not use. One is a Lorraine glass. This is simply, it's very easy to make, just a simple piece of blackened glass. The way you use it is hold it on your bridge of your nose and look at your subject, which it turns the subject upside down, flattens the tone colours, which enables you to check your shapes, the accuracy of shapes, and enables you to get accurate tones. Speaking of tones, another great tool, which there isn't anything commercially available, but I'll make them myself, is just a Polaroid filter. It's simply two pieces of Polaroid glass or plastic, and you can look through and turn and darken it down as dark as you would like, and then open it up at different stops, and that enables you to check your tones for accuracy during any parts of the painting. Particularly useful in my studio works. I don't use it so much on plein air. But it's also, I always have them on hand just in case I need them. The surface I'll be using today is a 66 OPL oil prime linen. It's a medium grade, all rounder, not too fine, not too coarse. And that enabled me to get all these beautiful variety of edges in the painting. The process I'll be using today is alla prima, which is just all in one hit, wet into wet, which enables me, which obviously you do on plein air, where you're out in the fields, you have a short space of time to capture the scene in front of you and something about the scene, which is what I try and do. As you can see here, this is a mountain scene with very quick fleeting light. It was painted around about 6:30 p.m. And with these high-ish mountain ranges or hill ranges, the light disappears very quickly. And that's often the thing that I chase, is the light. And often you don't have much time at all. So a few things about the process of on plein air painting. Pays to have a good setup, a simple setup, one that works for you, but then have it all set up ready to go. The last thing you want to do when you're chasing light is to be fiddling with caps on paint or just trying to find that right brush in your bag or your kit. So I have everything ready to go, even if the light is changing, and then when I'm ready to go, then I can just chase that light. Part of that is obviously having enough paint squeezed out on the palette. I'll be just basically no underpainting. I will just take one of the riggers and just doing a few marking lines, horizon line, top of the mountain, just to get that nice design on the canvas. I can take time to do that, but then when I then go into the actual painting process, then my process is to absolutely go for it and do it in as short a time as possible. Doing that process really helps me to get a freshness, I think, in my painting. It's a very limited time. You are forced to just choose a simple subject. You are forced to choose a very simple way of looking at the scene, which I believe is the paradox is it makes it more complex in the painting. And like, you know, life drawing, that having a short space of time really just helps you hone into what the essentials are in a painting. As you can see, the light source is coming from the right here and casting these beautiful long shadows, and you get a beautiful combination of these dark greens in the hills and these violets in the dry grass in the foreground as they go into the shadow. Basically, I will be just working from the back to the front. So I'll lay in the sky, I'll lay in the mountain ranges, work my way forward, knowing that I'm setting up ready for this bit of light that is just hitting the main area of interest in the painting, which is obviously these trees and the shed here. So in mentioning these things about the en plein air process, what we're actually doing today is a studio painting where obviously you have a much longer opportunity and period of time to work on the painting. And that's a good thing in one way, but it also can be very detrimental in another way, because then there's a tendency to overwork, lose the freshness, overthink the painting, and lose that vibrancy. So the challenge is in this studio painting is to get the freshness of the en plein air study, work it up a little bit more. As you can see, we're going slightly larger, and but still keeping that lovely freshness. It's not going to be an exact copy. The whole painting process, I find, is just an individual one in every single painting. Even if I paint the same scene the next day, or you know, do as I'm doing today, working from the scene, it'll end up being a slightly different or somewhat significantly different painting. And I tend to just follow that process. I don't try and force the painting in a particular direction. My process is really about following the painting, and I guess that's working intuitionally as well as, you know, cognitively with the skills that I have. In saying that, let's start painting. So, where do we start? I'm going to take a little bit of ultramarine blue, just very thin, bit of medium. And as I mentioned previously, look at some of these compositional placement. Now obviously I'm reasonably happy with the composition of the sketch, but I think, you know, just to accentuate the valley in King Valley, I'm going to lift the horizon up a little bit. So sometimes I just put a couple of marks there so I know where the centre of my canvas is. I'm not necessarily worried about the vertical middle. And I'm going to lift this hill up a little bit more. So you can see it's sort of in the sketch, it's down here somewhere, but I'm going to lift it up higher here. So in this process, which is really important, the compositional process, while you don't have a lot of time in a sketch, in a studio painting, obviously you have much more time to make these changes. So I love painting from my plein air sketches because I feel I get the best of both worlds by working to get the freshness of a plein air sketch, but then making those very deliberate decisions to improve on it, which really is, I believe, what, say, Streeton did. Those beautiful big paintings in the National Gallery, you know, some of them are painted en plein air, but some of them are studio paintings as well. And, you know, obviously he's had more time to make deliberate choices. So we're going to have one big horizontal here. We're going to have the big diagonal here. nice little kick there. And I might even continue it further along on the canvas there, like so. I'm not fussy, of getting, having perfectly straight lines or perfect lines. This is just a bit of an idea of where I'm actually going to place the large elements. The shed, somewhere there. We've got the bunch of trees here. So you can see I'm sort of just feeling my way into how it's going to look on this canvas. I think unless you particularly decide to change it, it's always a good idea to have the same format as your study, because as soon as you change the format of your canvas, then you're making very, very different compositional choices. One of the things I like about this little study, and it sort of just happened by accident, is this nice diagonal here. We've got this other hill here. Some trees there, the shadows here, and something going on there. So I might just take a little bit of red, we'll use burnt sienna, and just show you what I feel I've got compositionally. So I've got strong horizontal, I've got a vertical here, I've got another vertical here, I have a diagonal here, and I have another flatter diagonal here. Then I have an echoing diagonal here, which is sort of the lead into the painting. And then we've got, to balance all those lines and big shapes and directional lines, then we've got some, sort of smaller compact shapes to balance it. So good painting is just a variety of shapes, tones, colours. And I really believe all painting, including representational painting, is abstract first and foremost. And yeah, my interest often is to try and make these as abstract as I can, but still keep them realist. And that is that real challenge of trying to find the right brush marks and the right bits and pieces to get to that place. That's the challenge, that's the difficulty, but that's what one of the things I really love about oil painting. I'm not trying to represent everything as it is, I'm just trying to find that fine line on the edge, so to speak, of abstraction and realism. And then we can just get into the process. So I'm going to take a reasonably large brush and I'm going to work from back to front. So obviously I'm going to mix the sky first, and I'm going to keep that reasonably thin, bit of cobalt blue. As you can see, it's a fairly clear towards evening, a little bit of ultramarine. This part of the painting, the very start, it's always, no matter how much I've painted, it's always like, feeling your way in and getting started. You've got to start somewhere, you've got to basically put something on canvas to just get going. So you can see there, it's probably a little bit blue. I'm going to add a tiny little bit of yellow, a little bit of yellow ochre maybe. This time of day, the sun's starting to hit towards green. Like that, so pretty happy with that, but tuning my eye in and getting into the feel of it. Like everyone, haven't mixed enough paint, but that's all right, we can just come back and remix it. And I'm just going to lay that sky in. Now you'll find probably that burnt sienna will end up in the paint and grey it down a little bit. That's fine. We'll just get rid of a bit of it there. Now often I don't have time to come back in a plein air study to really work the sky, but here in the studio I can make much more deliberate choices. So as we head up to the zenith, which you can see in the study, it starts to get a little bit warmer, a little bit stronger in colour. And this is where, in a studio, you can start to think about the transition of tone colours, say in the sky here, from top to bottom, and the type of brush strokes you're going to use to enhance your painting. And here I'm just using some cross-hatching, crisscross brush strokes, borrowed often from the Impressionists, to just create a sense of movement. I think it needs to be lighter down near the horizon here. I'll just put a little bit more white in here, but I think I'll revisit this towards the end of the painting. Okay, out of this pool, so one of the things I try and do in all my paintings is mix each colour out of the previous colour to get a harmony to the whole painting. I'll take another brush and I'm going to mix an Australian grey-green. Which I won't go through what it is now. Alright. So I'm going to use a lot of that through my painting, but I'm going to bring this into the sky here as well. And then of course, as you can see, it's got a lot of blue in it. Now I try and get the planes as close tone colour wise as I can, but often I need to come back and adjust. These hills always surprise me. They're often bluer than I think they are. Even bluer than that, more cobalt. But as you can see, I'm stringing out these colours, which enables me to get a beautiful variation in colours, which I'll often go back and use in different parts of the painting. One of the things I need to be aware of is the mood of the painting, or I like to be aware of, I should say, is the mood of the painting. And I think that's largely in the colours. Good old cobalt blue. Just love it. Now you might ask why I didn't start with this mountain range here. Sometimes I would, but as I said, I let the painting follow its own process. And I consciously remind myself not to try and make this paint go further than it should. So my philosophy is very much trying to find my way through each painting. I really, as Degas said, the more you paint, the less you know, or the less you know about painting, and I really feel that's true. The more I paint, the more I feel each painting is an absolute journey of its own, and they tend to take on a life of their own. Alright, so we'll go back and visit the intermediate hill, and as you can see here, I've got a few colours to actually, a few mixes to actually make those intermediate changes. Get into this beautiful violet here. My palette might look a little bit messy, but to me it's an ordered mess, ordered chaos. A little bit too violet, back to the blue. It's quite ultramarine-y, but I also want to keep it cool. So it's just trying to find that place. Still too red. Back to the blue, back to the blue. And because I'm working wet into wet, you know, I can even mix on the canvas. Cad red in there. Trying to find those beautiful colours of King Valley. Bring this into the sky. I'll worry about edges later. I'm leaving a little bit of the canvas here for the light there. I'll come back and put that on a bit later. This is where I love the black. Really darkens down my greens and still keeps them very rich. Bit of this yellow. See this beautiful rich green of this hill here, the one in front. So basically I'm just putting down abstract shapes. I'm not thinking trees, I'm not thinking mountains, I'm not thinking, you know, any type of realistic structure. I am just painting abstract shapes, and I really, really enjoy this part of the painting. You can see the edges that form with this particular canvas, and you know, I just try and exploit those as much as I can to enhance my painting. Nothing like oil paint. So basically I'm putting down the mid-tone, mid-colour of each plane, knowing that I can come back and adjust. And even in the studio, one of my goals at the start or early on is to cover the canvas as quickly as possible. So go for all the big broad areas. You know, got a dark shadow through here. So I'm going to take the main colour here, which is this mid sort of violet, yellowy violet. warmer yellowy violet. And often not completely mixing the paint together, as you can see here on the palette, letting some of it mix together on the canvas. And that was not how I was taught, it's just something that's developed over time. And I just think, I guess it just comes by a whole lot of painting, of knowing how unmixed paint on a brush is going to end up in a beautiful multicoloured stroke like that on a canvas. Sometimes it doesn't work and you have to go and scrape it off, but that's part of the process of oil painting. And that's okay. So basically I'm just mapping in the big darks, mid-tone of the darks. I've moved that diagonal line over a little bit as a bit of a lead in, and here. So it's basically just getting paint on. Not being super particular about everything, but still going for accurate tone colour. The other thing in the studio is I can play around a bit with pushing the colour or varying the colours, and often in a studio painting I've already gone through the process of thinking about my colour harmonies, how I'm going to lay them together. So you can see it's still very broad. Haven't done anything about edges. I'll come and do that shortly, or sorry, slightly later. It's just about getting this canvas covered. So I've got to bring this green down to get right down to and set up for putting in those beautiful lit buildings. Lots of red in that green and black. Get that dark so I can really punch these lights over the top. Where I can see broken edges, I tend to break them as well. It's much easier to strengthen up edges as you go along than it is to try and break them up. Excuse me, to try and break them up again. So if they're broken, I tend to keep them broken as well. Some nice and green right there. Now obviously I'm trying to find a balance between keeping what I actually painted in the plein air sketch, but also taking that further without taking it too far, and that's the challenge of painting. And I guess for me at times that's the thing that keeps me awake at night, wrestling with it, but it's what we love. Some of these hills here, when I'm painting, you know, some aerial perspective, I really try and go for the true colour, and it's often difficult to get these hills with it when there's a lot of white canvas. So when I start to get to this stage where the canvas is largely covered and I've got say a foreground hill like this, then I can go back and readjust these colours, and that's what I'm going to do now. So I'm going to spend a bit of time fiddling around and talking to myself in my head, asking myself things like, is it a red, yellow or a blue? So it's a blue violet. What blue is it? Ultramarine and cobalt. But it's also got a red in it. Which red? Well, let's put a bit of this on. Too light. Often alizarin, something like that. And a tiny bit of yellow, blue, violet, yellow, orange. I don't have an orange here. I'm going to make a little bit of orange over here, and I'm going to use that to grey off my blues as I go along. I mean, obviously you don't want every tube of colour on your palette, and we can make those secondaries pretty easily. Ah, that's better. Yep, just grey that off, it was too green. So just adjust this in here, like so. And you can see this beautiful high, not high key, starting to head towards high key atmospheric effect here, which you will see at this time of night. The further the sun goes down, the more and I can even push that a little bit. You know, if there was plenty of smoke around, you know, at whatever time of year it is, it tends to sit in the valleys, and these go quite light. So they're the things I can think about in a studio painting as opposed to a quick en plein air. Back to that hill in the distance. Now mine's too blue, too light. Sorry, too dark. So I'm going to come back and I'm going to lighten that off. And this is a significant part of the painting, of that leading you right through to the distance, and I'll come and fiddle around with that a little bit later on as well. So back to covering the canvas. Going to go for a new brush. And I'm going to put in some of these lights. I might just start with the foreground. Beautiful warm yellows. One of my favourite painters is John Singer Sargent, and if you look at his body of work, he often really pushed the colour almost to the point where it was just touching the edge of being a little bit unrealistic. And I think that's a really nice place to go to, where, you know, the colour becomes a significant part of your painting. And that's what I like. I really love colour, as you can see, and that's been an ongoing journey in my painting as well, of actually not just mixing true colour, but then actually playing with it in an appropriate and a sensitive way. Now you can see here, this is slightly too dark and it's not really grey enough, and this is where having a loaded brush like this, I could actually work wet into wet, and I can actually get some really nice passages with the right sensitivity on the painting, which each step adds to the process of the painting. It really, the other thing with painting is I find if you listen to it, it just talks to you all the time. You know, when I'm feeling this needs some blue over here, you can see it's asking for that blue shadow. And as soon as I do that, it's asking for this light to go in here, and step by step, I really sort of feel the painting actually builds itself. And I think it's the job of the artist to listen to that process. They sort of really take on a life of their own. You can see some, you know, more blue happening here. And I feel at this point in this painting, this particular painting, I feel like it's now starting to take on the life of its own. Yes, I'm drawing from the en plein air sketch, I did, but this painting is starting to take on a life of its own, and I'm going to actually, you know, be open to listening to that. Some beautiful yellows as it goes up into the light there. There's a lot of European trees in King Valley. I love painting our grey, Australian greys, but I do like getting up there and painting some of these brighter European colours. You can see that one of the predominant, or almost the predominant mother colour in this painting is blue. There's lots of blues in it. Blue violet, blue green, blue. So bit by bit, I am finding, you know, all sorts of nuances of colour in here and trying to harmonise them together. So again, while it is a realist scene, I'm still thinking very much in an abstract way. Abstract in how I put the paint on, which brush I use, how I put the paint on, the direction of the brush, how much pressure I put on the brush, because more and more I was trained very representationally, you know, a realist, and my ongoing journey, personal journey, has been, you know, towards this sort of abstract, expressive way of painting realist paintings. And hence I've come up with my own way of trying to be, or not even trying now, it just is almost like a second nature to just express. I sort of see a tree and it just, I feel I need to express it like this or like that or like that. You know, sometimes like that, sometimes brush very parallel to the canvas. Looking forward to getting into these lights in here, but still being aware of setting this up so when I put those lights on, I don't have to fiddle and overwork them and lose the vibrancy in the light. I can just pop them on in the right place and pull this painting together. You can see the light is coming up over the hill, or the sun's going down, the light's directed this way to the left of the canvas, so it's just hitting these trees here. So I'm going to lighten off and more green as I head into this here. Now when I'm working in the studio, I tend to use the same brushes, I just go up in size. They're just bigger brushes. So I use the same sort of combination of brushes, they're just bigger. I love the violet in there, just quieten that down a little bit. Here. So I want a reasonably flat horizon line to the paddock, because it was looking across a paddock there. So basically, I think I mentioned before, everything's an experiment. Every painting to me is an experiment. It's an exploration of colour. It's an exploration of several things. It's an exploration of colour, tone, abstract shapes, but also it's an exploration, internal exploration for me, of how I can express something I love about the world in this often very limited, clunky, sticky paint with a few sticks with brushes on the end. And again, that's what I love about oil painting and painting in general. That there is oil painting. What I love about oil painting. You know, you can put wet into wet, go too bright, gently knock it back like so. So often, as you can see, working to describe the form. Sometimes it's across the form, sometimes that's with the form. Sometimes just making big expressive marks like that and then actually tickling them back as needed. I particularly like this diagonal here, and then it tapers off on another longer diagonal over here. And these paddocks took on the most beautiful blue, green violets, which I thought really were just beautiful. All right, pretty happy where this foreground's heading. Looking forward to getting into this light here, but at the moment I might come back and now work on a few edges, soften some sky. So what I think I'll do is put the lights in these hills here, and then actually work on some edges. So you can see beautiful yellow green. So out of the blue. So as you can see on my palette, everything is unified. I've still kept, you know, my greens together, my blues together, my violets together, but I'm linking and using everything to grey, often grey each other off and harmonise the actual colours together. Let's see if this is too light. I know it's not too bad. I think it needs to be a little bit richer. A bit more burnt sienna and a bit more yellow ochre. And then we'll work up to the light. So you've got the light coming up over the hill here like so. And one of the challenges with oil painting is to put the marks on and don't over blend. Describe what's going on, but without over blending. So it might just fiddle around and get a little bit more light coming up here. And of course there's trees on this ridge line which meet the sky. And continuing on, a little bit of red in there. Here, so this, you know, trying to work out how to describe the light hitting these trees. So it hits the peak here, so I might, here. Here. So what I'm thinking about is a pleasing pattern. Not only have we got pleasing pattern of the silhouette of the hill lines, but also a pleasing pattern of the light hitting these hills. Now you can see up until now I've been very direct about my brush strokes, and now often I then start to, like flicky, hard to describe, but sort of, just using the brush to touch certain things. What I think it needs now is I'm actually going to take a piece of paper towel and just wipe out the lights in this hill here. Again, this is the beauty of oil painting. Oil prime linen you can wipe off like so. And then we can reapply the lights as needed. You get a real sense of light. The other thing I use often is my fingers, or this beautiful blending brush. So I'll get some sky into the brush, and then we can, wiping out with a piece of paper towel in between, getting that hill to disappear into the distance. Now I'm going to come back and actually put a little bit of light here, but I'm going to do that when I put the other lights in, so not too fussed about this not being soft, overly softened. But as you can see, does it help the painting? Well, possibly. The thing I haven't quite hung on to is the ridge in that hill here, but we're going to actually kick it up and put it in now. So you can see this sweeps down here, and then I'm going to just kick off this hill down there like that with a few trees. I believe in a good painting, there should be enough information to really get the viewer in and tell a story, but also plenty of room for the viewer to actually fill in the blanks and engage the viewer in bringing their own story to it, their own ideas. Coming back into that distance there. We'll just open up this valley a little bit like that. So what I'm going to do is just tackle the sky a little bit. Now, I definitely don't want any green in this. So I'm taking a clean brush. Just want to see what that looks like. It needs to be slightly yellower, so which yellow? I'll put a tiny little bit of yellow ochre into that. I just want to bring that sky, A, to shape this mountain up a little bit, and B, to just bring that sky a little bit lighter at the horizon. And as I do that, I can use this to actually knock those hills into the sky a little bit, and maybe even create some sky holes of those trees at times. I feel it's a little bit strong, so sometimes you've just got to risk things in painting, so I'm going to risk it by just running the brush over this and let's see what happens. Yep, don't think that detracted from the painting. Paid off. But I would like to you can see I'm keeping the brush fairly raggy, and that that happens too plenty of times. It's all part of the painting process. I'd like to get this bit of a dip in there like that, because I do like that shape. You know, break this into there and that into there, you know, blah blah blah. Sort of makes sense in my head when I'm doing it. All right, and even sometimes the trusty old finger. I think it's a really sensitive tool to use to paint with, without blending too much. All right, onto the lights, onto the real lights. Plenty of paint into here. Now they're beautiful yellow orange lights. A little bit of cad yellow deep, a bit of yellow ochre. Oh, and I think even a bit of cadmium yellow to kick them up. Let's see, here we go. And I tend to put these on quite thickly. And this is where your quality paint, like a Michael Harding paint, I think really comes into its own when you're loading on thick paint and it's buttery and lovely and malleable. So I'm going for a fairly flat horizon, and I will break it up at some stage. Lots of horizontal brush strokes, because that's sort of, you know, the way I feel it needs to be described. And just starting to soften some of those edges and get some of those beautiful colour transitions. Onto the red orange here. Hardly any medium, pretty much straight. You can see there's this really nice, almost like an arrow going into the picture. Getting some transitions of colours as you know you go through the brush stroke like so. Yep. So again, I'm not trying to copy this exactly. I'm using it and building on what I've got and letting the painting actually take me on its own journey. I think for the sake of it, I might, and you can see that light's continuing on here, I might just bring a bit of light across there as well. Into here. Back to my nice big darks. Beautiful Prussian blue, some cad yellow and cad yellow deep, and of course it's probably a little bit too green. So I'll add a little bit of red. I'm going to add a little bit of cadmium red to that. I do like this big dark going across here though. And sometimes to get that, way to do it is sometimes even paint across the form. Doesn't always work, but again, the beauty of oil paint is we can change things as we need to. Now, there's this nice transition of colour there. And of course, in here, there's all sorts of interesting farm things going on in there. And I guess by tackling those, we're going to start to head to some of our dark accents. So it's actually a pile of a bonfire, a pile of branches in a field. But you know, I'm not going to paint every branch. I'm going to try and get something on that describes that, but also is pleasing from a painterly point of view. And I remember painting this, one of the things I liked about it was there was like a pile, like a teepee pile there. Get some of that green going into there. This green going into there. So again, a big part of painting is harmonising the colours without actually blending them all together, because we know if you blend too much, it's quite easy to just get, the colour dies off, and it's quite easy to just get a sense of mud or an appearance of mud. Alright, heading back over here into these trees. I'm going to start to use up a bit of this paint that I've got on the palette, so you can see that the light was hitting here. There are lots of European trees, so they're quite vertical and quite glowing, which I haven't quite got there, so I'm going to bump up the chroma. And the tone. Really go for that yellow-green. Which I remember actually doing the plein air sketch was quite a challenge. The light was fading fast, but I was really wanted to chase down some of those bright greens. Yep, something like that. There's lots of poplar trees around that area. So you see those, you know, beautiful verticals, which is one of the attractions of King Valley, I think. Vary the directions of the brush strokes. Beautiful dark green stripe in there, bridging colour. Now, one of the things I'm now starting to look for is the intermediate colours. What do I mean by that? Like bridging colours. You can see here I've got a yellow here and I've got a green here. But if you look closely at nature, there is these beautiful bridges to join the two. What do I mean by that? Well, here's an example, right? Here's a yellow-green bridging those two there. So taking your eye from one colour to the next. And if you look carefully, they're everywhere. And of course, that's where, you know, your good solid colour theory comes into it, of actually knowing what they will be, and then by knowing what they'll be, you then end up actually seeing them. And that's why I love teaching my students about colour, because it just opens their eyes to a whole other world that, unless someone points it out to them, like it was pointed out to me, most people, even some painters, don't see it. And that's what I love about, love about colour. So you can see I'm getting a bit more tentative about brush strokes and what I put where, trying to make each one count and still do the job. Still haven't really tackled many edges, and that's fine because I feel I really do that mostly at the end of the painting. Got some poplar trees here, so we'll just sort of describe those. And you've got these beautiful dark greens again inside. I know a lot of people don't like black, but I don't think I could paint without black on my palette. I just love it. It's the most beautiful low chroma blue you'll come across, and I find it very, very useful in so many circumstances. I just think it needs to be used with caution and just with some good sound knowledge. All right. Now let's get into the exciting bit. Let's get into the light. So now we're going to go for the lights. Beautiful thick paint, beautiful colours, and really the main area of the story. So basically up until now I've just been setting myself up to tell this story. And the challenge for me over the years has been to be able to tell this with the least amount of brush strokes and give the most amount of information, and that's what that is sort of like, to me, the whole goal of painting, is to be able to tell a story with ease. So just thinking, got the tree here, so we're going to have a bit higher grouping here, got the low shed here, got another tree there. So let's just pop this tree in, just describe the light. And it's amazing when you describe the light, how much or how little other information you really need. So we know the light source is coming this way, so we'll just, little tree like so on one side. Got here. The right brush. Tend to use some raggy brushes at times because they don't give very clean marks. They give their own sort of feel, and that's why I keep all my worn out brushes. And again, I'm constantly experimenting with what they can actually do. Going to add a little bit of warm yellow into there, a bit of yellow ochre. Here. There's a tank and everything that goes in there, but we'll come to that in a minute. Here, we'll get that to meet the light there. And you can see on my palette, beautiful, thick, chunky paint. I hang out with Bob Senior a lot, and I tend to agree with him when he says, he says, people think I say it because I own an art store. He said that is absolutely not the case. He just thinks at times there is not enough oil paint going on canvas in Melbourne, and I tend to agree at times. I think you see a lot of people painting very thinly, and I think that oil paint, one of the best characteristics of it is the beautiful buttery juiciness of it, and I tend to think that really needs to be exploited. It's not to say everyone should paint thickly, but I just think, to me personally, I just love seeing the beautiful juiciness of oil paint, like so, because you can do things with it when it's thick that you can't do when it's thin. So now I'm just starting to describe a few of the things that are going on, buildings, bits and pieces. Picking up paint, sometimes even picking up paint from one part of the painting. If I think something's not quite working, you know, maybe example here, take that bit of paint and I can use that somewhere else. And again, all that sort of stuff, you know, continues to harmonise the painting. On that dark side of the tree, I do want a little bit of a shift, but I want it very dark. I just want a shift so you can see the other side of the tree, but it is just a very faint shift. Now, the house. We all love a good tin roof. This is where black comes into it. It's very much black and white. It's the beautiful colour of the tin roof. So I'm going to pop that in and use a flat. Like so. And you know, I can come back and cut around that, which I will in a minute. I want this just to disappear into the shadow there. So I just want part of the shed to actually catch the light. So look, there's all sorts of things that go on in, you know, farmland, as you can see. It's just a matter of, you know, getting some of those in without getting too much in. Alright, now before I come to some of the real jewellery parts of the painting, when I look at it, there's a few things colour-wise that I really would like to exploit as well in my study. There's just some beautiful blues that I'm going to just pop in and play around with. Example, this beautiful dark blue in the foreground there. It sort of echoes what's going on there. That's maybe a little bit cool. I'm going to put a little bit of burnt sienna into it, and I'm actually going to just paint the burnt sienna straight over the top. There we go, that's what we want. Just so it greys it back a little bit. Same in here, there's a beautiful bit of blue in there, and I just want to try and, you know, get those shadows in that fading light. Now you can see sometimes it's just too obvious and too bright, but again, this is where oil paint comes into its own, and we can do things like take a bit of green and just put that over the top. And of course, sometimes you just lose it, so you go for it again, like so. And sometimes, you know, some of the passages actually need to be scraped back. Nothing I can see at this stage, but that is a possibility at some stage shortly. Describing those shadows, and yeah, keep it nice and dark in the foreground there. So beautiful dark violet. I'm using ultramarine and burnt umber. Burnt sienna here, and even a bit of burnt umber in that to just keep this nice and dark and rich in the foreground. Warm it up so the foreground is coming towards us. Now, occasionally it really pays to stand back. Well, not occasionally, regularly it really pays to stand back and ask yourself, am I on, you know, still on track with the painting? I feel I am. I feel this painting is a painting of its own, but I still feel I am on track. There's a few other things I'd like to do, but at this stage I would like to get rid of a few of the edges. So I'm actually wiping out one of my flat brushes, and I'm just going to use that to, you know, again, just describe some marks. So you can see this, I think this is too sharp. I would like this lost. So, you know, we can do things like this where the paint melds together. I think this is a little bit sharp, but this time I'm going to choose to actually put a bit of a bridging colour between the two. I've got some on my palette, and I'm going to put this intermediate colour just to bridge that and soften it down, as you can see. I like the strong light there, even though I softened that off, I've lost the strong light, but again, it's oil paint, we can simply come back and put it in over the top. Like so. And you can see the beautiful drag you get sometimes, which is all part of the juicy characteristic of oil paint. Yep, I think I'm definitely on track of keeping the feel of the painting, which I'm pleased about. Coming back to the shed, bit of nice dark violet underneath the eaves there. And I think what I might head towards now is actually using this rigger, this 95 rigger, which I developed with Senior Arts and Neath brushes, because I think, to me, and this is why we developed it, to get some of these beautiful expressive marks. Example, the light along these hills here, this sort of thing. A little bit more golden, I think it needs to be. You know, the light just hitting these hills here. You know, it's just getting the right bit in the right place. So just keeping that feel of the light pouring across the hill there. Yes, changing colour, changing tone as it goes across, but still keeping the story. This, and just hitting these treetops. Echoing what's going on there, but it's a little bit richer. And yeah, just trying to keep them expressive, minimalist, and descriptive. Tree there. And I can't remember who said it, but it's indicate, not state. You know, sometimes I make very definite statements, but for this, it's much more of an indication than a statement. Is that a building? What is that? And that's where, you know, I believe you engage the viewer in, you know, carrying on the story. Same here, what's this, you know, against the shadow, you know, is it fences, is it sheep, cows, what could it be? And I do go down to a smaller rigger, for some of those even finer, beautiful jewellery marks, you know, some branches, sticks. It's a bit of dark in there, that's a little bit dead. I'm going to lighten that off with a bit of blue. That's better. enough, but not too much. Need a little bit of rust on the shed. Obviously some burnt sienna and maybe a bit of burnt umber. And I'm not trying to paint everything perfectly, you know, I'm just indicating. There was a beautiful tank stand here, you know, so you could just see a few of the legs were just really just starting to catch the light there. Take a flat to just paint the light side of the tank here. And you can see with oil paint sometimes, you know, the mark doesn't quite go on how you want it to, but we can just trim that back, square it off. Going to pop some really nice dark blue violet on the other side to just give it a bit of form, like so. And there's, you know, all sorts of golden things going on where the last bit of light was just touching things. Looking for again, just this bluey, just want a little bit more form to this tree, a bit lighter here, that's it, that's it. Don't really like this, I think it needs a little bit of breaking up, so I'm going to do just give it a little bit of breaking up, like so, that's better. Yep. So I'm sort of thinking realistically and abstractly at the same time, if that makes any sense. Again, stepping back and asking myself, am I on track with the feel of the painting and the mood? I think yes, although there's still a few things I would like to do to pull it together, and one of them is, again, back to this dark here. I like that darker there, to echo that there. Ah, that's it, yep. I'd like a few more darks in here. Just so that sort of fades off a bit. And I would like a little bit of the blue violet again showing in here. There we go. Character with the sag. And, you know, keeping it lively with some of these lively brush strokes. I don't want to lose them. This one across here, but I'm going to make it more violet. It's beautiful, this sort of thing. And particularly the lights. There's always something laying in the paddock. Keep that a bit unified. So at this stage, just looking at a few things, I've lost the shape of the shed a little bit, so just with my flat, I'm just going to come back and, you know, get that pitch of the roof there. You know, some things do need to be accurate, you know, within reason, and that's where, you know, in the studio you can take your time and really, I'm loath to say fiddle around, but certainly spend the time getting the accuracy you need. That brush stroke didn't help the painting, let's take it out. And, you know, that happens all the time, it's just part of painting. I feel some of these marks are a little bit bitsy, but I'm going to put a little bit more paint on and then knock them back a little bit. I think this is a little bit bitsy here, so I'm going to strengthen this up with a few stronger darks. That's better. And a little bit like the sketch, I'm going to join those two together because I think it works better that way. I feel I've lost a little bit of the clean light in the that long stroke of light, so again, the beauty of studio painting is you can take your time to just readjust them. So I really, you know, it was one of the attractive parts of making this painting was this just one side of the tree in light and then this beautiful long light here. So I sort of lost it a little bit, so we'll just come back and restate that. That's better. Here, you know, so simplification. Leonardo da Vinci said, what, 500 years ago, simplification is the ultimate form of sophistication. And I always remember that, so simplification is the key. And as I head towards the end of the painting, it's as much about simplifying as it is about anything else. What do I mean by that? Simplifying? Well, one of the examples is these trees over here. You know, maybe the light's a little bit too broken, as you can see in the study. So, whoops. green enough. As you can see in the study, it's a little bit more unified, the light patch. So we'll just go, we'll do that. There we go. Even coming down on those trees there. I just want a sense of this light, dark mountains and the light washing over and just getting the last of the day. There's a few other little beautiful things that are happening. There's this beautiful bit of blue in here, a bit of straight King's blue. I don't know how that happened, but I'm going to take that into this actual painting, like so, like that. Actually, I'd like to take it even further, so we're just going to go ooh, like that. And I think we're really getting towards the pointy end. Again, the painting is directing itself. Have I achieved, my questions I'm asking myself are, have I achieved what I set out to achieve without actually fully controlling the process? And I think the answer is yes. Do I need to take anything out? Not that I can see, but there's a few things I maybe would like to just soften off. And this is where, again, this softening badger hair brush comes into its own. So we can do things like, just bring this tree here like that. Just to bring this around like that. Maybe even just, soften this off here like so. And I think just to complete the story, is this just beautiful. I feel this is a little bit clunky compared to what I have in the study. So I'm going to just try and lay this on in the right way. And often I just like doing this in my head to just, how does it need to go? Let's see if we can do it. I'm going to bring it back here, and it's just going to be this mark like so. That's what I want. Here, here, here. Yeah, might pop a bit of that in there, a bit more golden. And a little bit of canvas showing through there, so I might just push that in, put the light there. And a little bit of grass coming into the shadow like so. Same with here. Just that right amount. And of course, often I do this, or most of the time I do this listening to music. And I really feel it just enhances that my whole intuitional process, because I just get in this zone where sometimes I feel the painting just basically paints itself. Yep, sometimes you get the most beautiful statements like that, and I could think, well, that's a little bit sharp and fiddle with it, but I'm going to leave it there. I think it's a strong statement for the painting, and a bold statement, and to me that really keeps the viewer engaged in your painting. Last few little bits and pieces. to our trusty riggers. It's just, there is a bit of a fence there, and I would like to get some sort of fence thing happening, so we'll make a Yep, I think we're nearly there. I think one of the really attractive parts of this painting is this beautiful violet. And again, I remember really wrestling to get it, is this mark here, this tone colour here off this shadow. So it's sort of like, yeah. And this is where I'm going to make a deliberate choice and even just push that violet a little bit. Yep, there we go, like that. And just have this. And just back to those hills a little bit. I think just needs a little bit of a light on the hill here, fading light. I like that strong statement in here by itself, so I'm going to sort of emulate that a little bit. Whoops, too much. Happens. Don't panic. Just bury it back into the painting a bit. There we go. Not really keen on all those three. There we go, that's it. So sometimes, yep, getting rid of things is the way to go. And I'm going to take my trusty piece of fencing wire, which has been around a lot of paintings with me as well. And, you know, we can scratch a few things in if we need to. And those, just those last little marks that, you know, use up a little bit of the paint appropriately on the canvas. I like that little mark there on the original study. And I think I'm pretty much there. I think it says everything I want it to say. Just need one little bit of yellow brown in here. So that's it, there we go. Yep. And a little bit of bridge there. It's a little bit too dominant. There we go. And I think we are pretty much there, and I might just put my initials on it. Sign it off. Actually, I'll tell you, sometimes it takes me 2 or 3 goes to get these paintings signed, because I think it's an integral part of the painting process. So sometimes I just like to set up that area just to give me, so it's not too thick, so I can actually place my signature on there appropriately. Use a bit of red. And that concludes the painting.